This is your math gal, Julie Harland. Please visit my website at yourmathgal.com, where all of my videos are organized by topic. This is video 7 of solving equations with decimals, and we're going to do this problem on this video. So we just have a single term on each side, and so one way of doing this is simply dividing by 0.04 on both sides. And it's probably the easiest way for most people. And then you have to deal with this. How do you do 5.6 divided by 0.4? Well, one way is you just could go over here and divide this way. But remember, you have to have a whole number, what you're dividing by here. So you move the decimal 2 to the right. That's like multiplying this number by 100 and that number by 100 when you move the decimals over. And then that means the decimal really is going to be here. And so you're really doing 4 into 560. And that is 140 if you do your division. All right, so that's one way of doing 5.6 divided by 0.04. Somebody else might do it a different way, where before doing the division, you multiply the top and bottom by 100 to make sure there's a whole number in the denominator. So when you multiply the numerator and denominator by 100, you get, well, you have to move the decimal in the numerator 2 places, so that's 560. And in the denominator, you're going to move it 2 places. And so you get the same problem. It ends up looking exactly like it did up there without all that moving around with the decimal points. You do 4 into 560 that way as well. Okay, so you might want to review my video on how to divide with decimals and, different ways you could, get the answer to 5.6 divided by 0.04. And of course, you could always put it in the calculator if you're allowed to use that. But the main idea is, how do you solve this equation? And one method is you divide by 0.04 and then you deal with the decimals. Dividing decimals. Whoops. Wasn't quite ready for that. Okay, so what's another way of doing it? You can start with the same problem. 0.04x equals 5.6. And you could say, well, I don't really want to deal with all those decimals, so this would be better if this was just a 4. How do I make that a 4? I can multiply both sides by 100. Okay, so that's another option. Before dividing by 0.04, go ahead and multiply both sides by 100. Now, you don't have to show out this. You don't have to show this step. A lot of people just know that when you multiply by 100, you're going to be able to move the decimal 2 places to the right, and so you get to write 4x equals 560. So I'm just showing that step. Now, another reason why you're multiplying by 100 is because if you had written these decimals as fractions, they would look like this. 400x equals 56 tenths. And notice the least common denominator is 100, right? So really, when you're multiplying by 100 here, it's the same thing as if you had changed it to fractions and multiplied by the least common denominator. It's exactly the same number. So we're still going to get, when you do, the same answer, except notice here I now have an equation without any fractions. And so a lot of people just find that easier. X equals 560 over 4, and that means x equals 140. All right, so there are different approaches to this. Simply dividing by 0.04, or first writing it as 4x equals 560 by multiplying both sides by 100. Let's check it. So we've got 0.04 times 140. That's what we're putting in for x. And then you have to do this multiplication. Again, you might want to refer to my videos on multiplying with decimals. There's different options. So you can go out on the side and say 140 times 0.04, for instance. That's one way of doing it, and go through and get your answer. I actually do it with fractions, but I'm not suggesting you do this, but I just like to show there's more than one way to do 0.04 times 140. And if you do it this way, I cancel the zeros here, and then that'll give me 56 tenths, or 5.6. And I had 5.6 on the other side, so 140 does check. So the answer to this problem was indeed 140. This is your math gal, Julie Harland. Please visit my website at yourmathgal.com, where all of my videos are organized by topic.